Well, they have a good team. I mean, I think we already knew that and anticipated that, but they were really aggressive, and I think that showed itself at times. And so part of growing is to have to adapt to that and maybe fail in some of those situations. But I thought we played hard. I think the biggest area of improvement for us, one is that I think we have to compete. Someone asked me before the game, and they said if there was one area that you could really play well tonight, I said it would be competing. If we were just to dominate from a competition and competitive spirit standpoint, I'd feel good about what we were going to do. I mean, either that or make 33s, whatever, which I'd take either one of those. But I thought that was the area. But they did a good job of attacking and competing. And there were times, some of it was because we had some young guys in there that haven't been in those situations before. Some of it is some guys it's not in their nature as much. And so if they have to log heavy minutes, it gets exposed more versus, some guys that were even playing last year that played smaller roles. And one game they didn't compete, another game they did pretty good or played well, and so they really added to our team. Well, this year, they're being counted on for some of that. And so I think that's probably the biggest area of growth. But they have a good team. It's a hard schedule, obviously. Auburn's not going to care too much about how things went today. But that was my really only source of any disappointment at all. Really, honestly, was that I thought we could have competed better in some physical situations and attacked more aggressively from a physical standpoint than what we did. That and still some things defensively that we have to clean up on, just some rules. They have good players. They're going to beat you sometimes, but you have rules that kind of help you navigate some of that stuff, and we're still violating some of those. Whether that be fatigue, lack of concentration, don't care enough to do it the way that you're asked to do it, whatever that is, we still have to clean some of that up.
Lamont, I realize that opponents are obviously keen on Colin, because he is the leading scorer. I think he's got 11 points and 8 turnovers in 2 SEC games now. Just how do you talk to him about saying, I know that they're doubling you, but you got to find a way past it?
Yeah, some of it's doubling. Some of it's, though, I think he's been sped up a little bit. I think there was more traffic in the Mississippi State game. And you got to make decisions in traffic and sometimes in a short amount of time, and he didn't do a great job that way. But I think if you look at the common denominator in these last 2 games, if you look at the from a personnel standpoint, who was guarding him most of the game, you have 2 guys that are really strong, right, that also are very mobile. And that's also what Colin does. That's why, from a defensive standpoint, he's hard to score on, oftentimes. Most of the guys that guard him usually have one of those. They can match his physical strength and power, or they're agile enough to stay in front of him when he makes a quickness move. And I just think it turned out in these last 2 games. You had 2 guys that were able to do that. And then we got to do a better job of getting him in space with, ball screen to pocket pass and letting him attack. And, I think he's probably best that way. It's a little more difficult to do that when he and Nick are both on the floor. Just there's not quite as much space to do that. So we've had success to this point when both those guys are in there at throwing the ball into the post and having one or the other make some good moves. But Colin just, he struggled with the personnel.
This was by far the most Arden's played in any game in his career. Was it just as simple as Miles not being available, or was there something else he's doing to earn those minutes? And I guess also, what did you see from him tonight in those minutes?
I think the primary impetus behind it was Miles being out. I mean, Miles plays 25-plus minutes for us, so you have to you have to account for those somehow. So it's one of a couple of things. Either the guys that are playing the bulk of the minutes amp their minutes up, and you distribute that over, the 2 or 3 positions that Miles would play, or you have to play some other guys. And I think the candidates that had identified themselves the most were Jordan Butler and Arden, of guys that weren't playing. Particularly Arden, because he's got a little more versatility in terms of how many positions he can play and who he can defend. I thought he did a good job defensively on the ball. I think the best thing he does is guard the ball while he's guarding his man and he has the ball. I think that's probably the best thing he does defensively. Once actions start happening and you got to make decisions on switching and communicate early on some of those things, as a younger guy, there's some struggles with that. But I thought he did a good job guarding the ball. He had a nice aggressive rip to the baseline, which drew a foul. So there were some bright spots for him. But I think the bulk of it was mainly because of, Miles being out and trying to just find some of those minutes, divvy those minutes up a little bit more so that certain guys didn't have to play. We didn't have to have 3 or 4 guys playing 37 minutes. I think you can do that one game here or there, but to do that for a whole season, rest of the season.
Jack in the front.
You mentioned Arden's defense a little bit. What have you seen from him in practice that's made you feel like he's made progress from the start of the summer to now?
Defensively, I'd say is the biggest part of it. I mean, he probably, just because at this time of the year, once you start playing these games, he's mainly playing his reps on the scout team, and so he hasn't stood out offensively as many times because he may be playing a guy that doesn't fit his skill set. So he's kind of handcuffed on what he can do based on trying to adhere to what the personnel and the scout is. So, but defensively and competitively, he's made some improvements. This game comes down to competing. At the end of the day, it comes down to competing. I just don't think if you look across the landscape of college basketball, by and large, I don't think there's near as much separation in just sheer talent. I don't. But those that really compete and fight and attack the rim and dive on a loose ball, and there's a scrum for a rebound, and it's no more your rebound than it is my rebound based on where we are and where the ball comes. Do I get it or do you get it? Do I let you get it or do I snatch it? The game, there's so many unpredictable plays in a basketball game, in 40 minutes of a basketball game, that come down to who wins those. And this was a prime example of not being able to do it. And so when you don't win those, it does make your margin of error smaller. You have to shoot the ball really well, or you can't turn the ball over the way that we did. Yeah.
Elijah and then John.
Coach, I believe the assist-to-turnover ratio after these first 2 SEC games is 18-29. What's kind of been the struggle on offense when it pertains to maybe ball movement and shot creation, balancing that with avoiding some turnovers?
Yeah, I think Mississippi State is I think that game, they play a unique style of defense. So opening up with that game, I think it probably skews it a little bit because there's not as much ball movement against them. It's just you're not going to attack it that way. So I think that skews it a little bit, but that doesn't excuse anything that happened with turning the ball over tonight. And I think it's decisions and execution of those decisions. Throwing a pocket pass, there's a window. It's certainly the right decision. Execution of that. I think there were a lot of situations where if we went back to that scenario, you could complete that play. I think you can complete that play. I think you just we have to be better. We have to be better basketball players than that. If you're going to turn those over, then you're going to have a lot of turnovers. We haven't done that in a lot of games. We've had some of these same situations. You got longer and more athletic guys that are getting here. Maybe they're sped up a little bit more than what they have, but you got to learn to slow down. And if we run a ball screen play, there's a reason why people run ball screens. You get an advantage. The defense has to decide what they're going to do. If they do this, you do that. If they do that, you do this. Like, we have to be able to execute those things. I think they're pretty normal things that if you're a player at this level, the expectation should be that you're able to do those things without turning the ball over. We had a couple more. Arden was in there. He's dribbles behind his back and dribbles it out of bounds on one. He goes between his legs on another one in the corner and turns it over. So some of it's that. Cam, another young guy, comes off and in a ball screen situation where we have an advantage. The guy guarding the screen attacks him, the roller's open, and he doesn't deliver it. And they steal it and go down and get an and one. So, some of it's younger guys doing that, but guys get sped up. Nick's going to turn it over some. He did in the last game. He traveled in this one. Colin's got to clean his turnovers up. He's got to be a much better distributor, or if he's not distributing, all his turnovers need to be that he attacked, something happened, the guy stripped him, which kind of was the case at Mississippi State. The guy stripped him or dribbled it off his leg. Like, the passes need to just be whatever is the most straightforward pass that's right in front of him. He needs to just make that.
John on the right.
Y'all weren't really able to make a run tonight to get it down to single digits in the second half or anything like that. First part is, when your team is playing well, what usually brings about a run? Is it usually on the offensive side or defensive side? And then what was Alabama able to do tonight in the second half to kind of prevent y'all from making one of those little spurts?
Well, I thought we did have a couple of spurts, and we were on the verge of a couple of real spurts. I mean, we cut it down to 14, and then we collapsed. I think these plays might have been in succession. Jamari fouls and sends Sears to the line for 2 free throws. Then on the next possession, I think Mo fouls Holloway. I think he fouled Holloway, and he goes for 2 free throws. And then the following possession after that, Colin's closing out to a non-shooter in the corner, and the guy drives him right by him for a layup. It's hard to manage that if you're going to do those things. These are not, you're going to foul sometimes. There's reasons. Guys attacking, these were not those. One thing that we were able to do last year, we managed those situations better. We did. When you have to make these decisions at this time in order to make a run happen. And you can do runs a couple of different ways. You can get a steal, pick 6, go down, throw a lob, get another one, hit a 3, timeout. There's runs that way. Sometimes you got to slow grind your way into a run, right? And you look up, and next thing you know, you've gotten 3 stops in a row, and you scored 3 times in a row, one of which was an and one, and it's an 8-0 run, just like that, right? But I think it has to start with our defense. You can't give up 88 points and feel like you're going to win. There are very few teams that are built that way, period. I just don't think guys are that talented to be able to say, we're just going to throw 90 points out there. Doesn't matter who we play, we're going to throw 90 points out there. If you look at last year's team, what we were able to do was say, you ain't scoring 80. In fact, you probably aren't scoring 70. And that came down to defense. Well, they play a certain style and blah, blah, blah. It's a 30-second shot clock. It ain't 50 seconds, right? It's 6 seconds more than the NBA shot clock. Those guys guarded. I think in SEC games last year we gave up 70 points or more 5 times out of 18 games. Give yourself a chance to win. You give yourself a chance to win. We have to learn what that looks like to be able to do that. These teams are good. It's hard to do that. This is probably Mississippi State's best offensive team. I mean, I think they would say that, right? On the road up there. You played Alabama. That's what, they score. That's what their thing is. It's probably hard to have a rough day at the office offensively and feel like you're going to get it done, right? But we also didn't do some things defensively. There are going to be a lot of teams, but there'll be some other teams that were maybe more suited to guard also, just from a talent standpoint, we'd probably be a little bit better against maybe this team or that team. But we got to learn what it looks like to be able to hold a team down. At the end of the day, you're going to get less than 1 point per possession. You got to be able to do that or hover right around 1 point per possession. And if you can do that, you got a chance to win.
Trey in the front.
First 5 minutes, it kind of felt like you guys came out with fire. After that 5 minutes, it felt like the scales kind of tipped in the favor of Alabama. Kind of what do you feel changed there, and what can you do going forward to kind of prevent that?
We played with a lot of energy early, and we were good. We were good. We had them. They picked the ball up, and when that happens, you know, we call dead. You probably heard me yelling it a lot during the games if you were paying attention. That happened more in this game than before. We were pressuring the ball. We stayed in front of the ball, which means they didn't pick the ball up, in which case we get aggressive as our other defenders. We get aggressive. We did that a bunch over the first 5 minutes. We did. I mean, just in the first half in general, I thought there were a decent amount of times that we got to that situation, which is usually a pretty good indicator of how active we're being defensively. So I thought we had really good activity. You know, some of it comes down to subbing. Some of it comes down to not subbing. And then a couple guys maybe aren't as fresh. If you play 6 minutes in a row, you're not going to be able to guard the ball the same way, right? So again, there's the conundrum of, okay, sub out to stay fresh versus keep those guys in there to get guys that have a better feel for what we want to get done defensively. And so, you know, some of it probably had to do with that, but it's a game of runs. They made runs, a couple here and there. And then we couldn't battle back with a run, and you know, just ultimately we couldn't get enough stops. They made a couple hard shots, but they also had way too many good looks, and they were aggressive. They put their head down and attacked, and you know, we had a bunch of fouls in the first half. It just we didn't resist the way that we needed to.
Anything else from Coach? Appreciate it. Thanks, Coach. Thanks, Lamont.
Yep.